Jake Martinez walked through the broken ruins of what used to be a city. His boots crunched on glass and metal pieces scattered across the ground. The air smelled like smoke and death. 3 days ago, this planet called Zarion Prime had been home to millions of creatures. Now it was nothing but empty buildings and ash. Jake worked as a scientist on the research ship Aurora. His job was to study alien life forms across the galaxy. But today he was not here to study anything. He was here to look for survivors after the big war between the Federation and the Vex Empire. The Vex had hit this planet hard. They destroyed everything they could find before the Federation forces drove them away. Jake had seen many war zones before, but this one felt different. This one felt final. He stopped walking when he heard a small sound. It was weak and sad, like a baby crying. Jake looked around the broken stones and twisted metal. The sound came again. He followed it to a large pile of rocks that used to be some kind of building. Jake moved the rocks carefully. His hands were strong from years of fieldwork. But he was gentle. Under the rocks, he found a small opening that led into what looked like a safe room. The crying sound was coming from inside. He took out his light and shined it into the dark space. 2 small creatures huddled together in the corner. They were no bigger than house cats, but Jake had never seen anything like them. They had scales that caught the light and made it dance with colors. One creature had green scales that looked like deep forest leaves. The other had blue scales that reminded Jake of ocean water. The creatures were hurt. Jake could see cuts on their small bodies, and one of them was breathing too fast. They looked at him with large eyes that seemed too smart for baby animals. Jake felt his heart beat faster. These were not just any creatures. These looked like the dragons from old Earth stories. Jake knew he should call his team right away. There were rules about finding new life forms, but these babies were dying. They needed help now, not later after long meetings and paperwork. He reached out his hand slowly. The green one tried to move away but was too weak. The blue one made a small sound that broke Jake's heart. It sounded like it was asking for help. "It's okay," Jake said in a soft voice. "I'm here to help you." He took off his jacket and wrapped it around both creatures. They were so light and small. Their scales felt warm against his hands. The green one looked at him with bright eyes and made a small chirping sound. The blue one pressed closer to Jake's chest. Jake walked back to his ship as fast as he could without shaking the hurt babies. The Aurora was parked 2 miles away from the city. His team was there waiting for his report. Jake knew they would not be happy about what he was bringing back. Dr. Lisa Chang was the first person Jake saw when he got back to the ship. She was the ship's doctor and Jake's close friend. Her eyes went wide when she saw the bundle in his arms. "Jake, what is that?" she asked. "Baby dragons," Jake said. "I found them under some rocks. They're hurt bad." Lisa looked around to see if anyone else was watching. "You know the rules about bringing unknown life forms on the ship." "They're dying, Lisa." "Look at them." Lisa looked down at the small creatures in Jake's jacket. The blue one opened its eyes and looked right at her. Lisa felt something strange in her chest when she saw those eyes. They were not the eyes of a dumb animal. They were the eyes of someone who understood. "Bring them to the medical bay," Lisa said. "But we need to tell Captain Rodriguez right away." Jake followed Lisa through the ship's halls. Other crew members stared as they passed. Security Chief Ryan Brooks stepped in their way. "What's in the jacket, Martinez?" Ryan asked. His voice was hard and suspicious. "Survivors," Jake said. "2 babies who need medical help." Ryan looked like he wanted to say more, but Lisa spoke first. "Let us through, Ryan. We can talk about this after I check if they're going to live." In the medical bay, Jake placed the babies on the soft table. Under the bright lights, he could see how beautiful they really were. Their scales had patterns that seemed to move and change. The green one had tiny wings folded against its back. The blue one had small horns that looked like jewels. Lisa ran her scanner over both creatures. "Their body temperature is too low and they're not getting enough air. But Jake, Look at this. She showed him the scanner screen. Their brain activity is off the charts. These are not just smart animals. These might be as smart as we are. Jake felt something touch his hand. The green baby had moved its small head to rest against his fingers. The blue one made a soft humming sound that seemed almost like music. "What are we going to do with them?" Lisa asked. Jake looked down at the two small faces looking back at him. He had made his choice the moment he found them under those rocks. "We're going to save them, no matter what it takes." Captain Helen Rodriguez came into the medical bay 15 minutes later. She was a strong woman who had seen many strange things in her years in space, but even she stopped and stared when she saw the baby dragons. "They're real," she said quietly. "And they're the last ones," Jake said. "Their whole planet is gone. Their whole species might be gone except for these two." The captain looked at the babies for a long time. The blue one had fallen asleep with its head on Jake's arm. The green one watched her with careful eyes. "We'll take them back to Federation space," the captain said finally. "But Jake, you know what's going to happen when we get there. The science teams will want to study them." Jake nodded. He knew. But right now, all that mattered was keeping these two small lives safe. He would worry about the rest later. The green baby made a small sound that sounded almost like it was trying to say his name. Jake felt something warm spread through his chest. These creatures had chosen to trust him. He would not let them down. 3 weeks had passed since Jake found the baby dragons on Xerion Prime. The Aurora was halfway back to Federation space, and the two small creatures had grown stronger every day. They were no longer the tiny, hurt babies Jake had pulled from the rocks. Now they were the size of small dogs, with bright eyes and healthy scales that shined in the ship's lights. Jake had named them Ember and Nova. Ember was the green one with the brave personality. She was always the first to try new things, and the first to protect Nova when she got scared. Nova was the blue one who loved to explore and ask questions about everything she saw. Both dragons had become Jake's constant companions. The crew had built a special room for the dragons near Jake's quarters. But Ember and Nova hardly ever stayed there. They followed Jake everywhere he went on the ship. When he worked in the lab, they sat on the floor nearby and watched everything he did. When he ate in the dining hall, they sat under his table and waited for him to share his food. Dr. Lisa Chang was amazed by how fast the dragons were learning. "Look at this," she told Jake one morning. She held up a small tool used for fixing electronics. "Yesterday I dropped this near Nova. Today she brought it to Tony when he was trying to repair a computer panel. She knew exactly what he needed." Jake watched Nova roll a ball back and forth with her front paws. The ball was a toy that engineer Tony Clark had made for the dragons. But Nova was not just playing. She was testing how the ball moved and bounced. Her eyes followed every movement like she was solving a puzzle. "They're getting smarter every day," Jake said. "Sometimes I think they understand everything we say." Lisa nodded. "Their brain scans show neural pathways forming at an impossible speed. It's like their minds are rewriting themselves to understand our world." Ember walked over to Jake and sat down next to his chair. She made a soft sound that Jake had learned meant she wanted attention. He reached down and scratched behind her small horns. Ember closed her eyes and made a happy humming sound. Ship counselor Patricia Wells had been watching the dragons interact with the crew. She was particularly interested in how they behaved around Jake. "The attachment they have to you is unlike anything I've seen," she told Jake. "It goes beyond simple gratitude or even normal bonding. They seem to consider you their family." Jake had noticed this too. The dragons became upset when he was away for more than a few hours. They would wait by the door to his room and make sad sounds until he returned. At night, they slept on the floor next to his bed. They would not eat unless Jake was there to share the meal with them. "Is that healthy for them?" Jake asked Patricia. "I mean, should they be so dependent on one person?" Patricia watched Nova trying to mimic Jake's hand movements as he worked on a datapad. Normally, I would say no. But these aren't normal circumstances. They're the last of their kind in a strange environment. You represent safety and family to them. Without that bond, they might not survive emotionally. The dragons had also formed relationships with other crew members, but Jake remained special. They were polite to Lisa and seemed to enjoy playing with Tony. They tolerated Ryan Brooks, though Ember always watched him carefully. Captain Rodriguez fascinated them, and they would sit quietly when she visited, like they understood she was the leader. But with Jake, they were different. They were relaxed and happy. They trusted him completely. When Jake spoke to them, they tilted their heads and listened like they were trying to understand every word. When he was sad or stressed, they would come and sit close to him until he felt better. One morning, Jake woke up to find Nova sitting by his bed with her head tilted to one side. She was making small sounds that were different from her usual chirps and hums. Jake listened carefully and realized she was trying to copy the way he said her name. "Nova," Jake said slowly. Nova opened her mouth and made a sound that was almost like Nova. It was not perfect, but it was clearly an attempt at speech. Jake felt his heart race with excitement. He called Lisa to come listen. When Lisa arrived, Nova repeated the sound. Ember, not wanting to be left out, tried to say Ember. Her attempt was even closer to the real word. "They're learning to talk," Lisa whispered. "Jake, do you understand what this means? We're watching the development of language in real time." Over the next few days, both dragons worked hard to learn more words. They practiced saying Jake's name until they could say Jake clearly. They learned food and play and yes and no. But the word that made Jake's heart melt was when Nova started calling him Papa. It happened during dinner time. Nova was sitting under Jake's table waiting for him to share his food, like always. When Jake gave her a piece of meat, she looked up at him and said, "Thank you, Papa," in her small, careful voice. Jake nearly dropped his fork. The whole dining hall went quiet. Even Captain Rodriguez, who was eating at the next table, stared in surprise. "Did she just call you Papa?" Tony asked from across the room. Jake nodded, not trusting his voice to work. Ember, hearing Nova use the new word, immediately started saying, "Papa, Papa," until Jake picked her up and held her close. From that day on, both dragons called Jake Papa, and he did not have the heart to correct them. The crew began to see Jake, Ember, and Nova as a family unit. It was strange and wonderful and completely against all Federation rules about human-alien relationships, but there was trouble coming. Jake received a message from Federation Command that made his blood run cold. The dragons had been classified as priority alpha specimens. When they reached headquarters, Ember and Nova would be taken to a research facility for extensive study. Jake read the message 3 times, hoping he had misunderstood. But the words were clear. The Federation wanted to know everything about the dragons' abilities. They wanted to test them and study them and find out if they could be useful in the war against the Vex Empire. Jake looked at Ember and Nova, who were playing together in the corner of his room. They had no idea that their happy life was about to end. They trusted him to keep them safe. They called him Papa and meant it with all their hearts. Jake made a decision that would change everything. He would not let the Federation take his children away. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, he would protect Ember and Nova. They were not specimens to be studied. They were his family. The Aurora continued through space toward Federation headquarters. Jake smiled and played with the dragons during the day. But at night, he planned how to save them from a fate worse than the war that had destroyed their world. He had rescued them once from death. Now he would have to rescue them from the very people he had always served. The Aurora was still 2 weeks away from Federation headquarters when the dragons began showing abilities that no one had expected. Jake first noticed it when Nova started spending time near the ship's computer systems. She would sit quietly next to the main computer panel in the lab, not touching anything, just being close to it. Tony Clark was the first to realize what was happening. "Jake, you need to see this," he called one morning from the engineering section. "The computer systems are running smoother than they ever have. All the little problems we always deal with are just fixing themselves." Jake brought Nova and Ember down to engineering. Nova immediately walked over to the large computer bank and sat down next to it. Her blue scales began to glow with a soft light that Jake had never seen before. "Watch the efficiency readings," Tony said, pointing to his screen. As Nova sat there, the numbers climbed higher and higher. The ship's systems were somehow improving just from her presence. "How is she doing that?" Jake asked. Tony shook his head. "I have no idea. She's not connected to anything. She's not even touching the computers. But somehow she's making them work better." Dr. Lisa Chang ran every test she could think of, but Nova's ability remained a mystery. The dragon seemed to understand computer systems in a way that was beyond current science. She could somehow sense problems before they happened and fix them without any physical contact. Ember's new ability was discovered 3 days later, during what should have been a routine maintenance check. Engineer Tony Clark was working on a power coupling when something went wrong. Sparks flew, and a small fire started spreading across the electrical panel. Tony grabbed a fire extinguisher, but before he could use it, Ember leapt forward and breathed something onto the flames. It was not fire that came from her mouth, but a fine mist that immediately put out the electrical fire without damaging any of the equipment. Everyone in the room stood silent for a moment. Then Tony started laughing. "She saved the whole panel. That fire would have destroyed thousands of credits worth of equipment." Jake knelt down next to Ember. "What did you just do, little one?" Ember looked proud of herself. She made a small puffing sound with her mouth, like she was practicing breathing the fire-stopping mist. Her green scales glowed with the same soft light that Nova's had shown. Lisa took samples of the mist that Ember had breathed. Her tests showed that it contained compounds that could stop fires without harming electronics. "Jake, this substance could change how we fight fires on spaceships. It's better than anything we currently have." But the most amazing change was in how the dragons communicated. They were learning to speak faster than anyone thought possible. Nova could now have simple conversations, asking questions about everything she saw. Ember preferred shorter phrases, but she could express her feelings clearly. "Papa sad?" Ember asked one evening when Jake was reading reports about their upcoming arrival at Federation headquarters. "A little bit, Ember. Just worried about some grown-up things." "We help Papa not sad," Nova added, moving closer to Jake's chair. "We love Papa." Jake felt his heart break a little more each time they said things like that. The dragons had no idea what was waiting for them at headquarters. They trusted him completely to take care of them and keep them safe. The crew was also becoming more attached to the dragons every day. Tony had started making new toys for them to play with. Lisa would sit with them during her free time and teach them new words. Even Ryan Brooks, who had been suspicious at first, now smiled when the dragons greeted him each morning. Captain Rodriguez called Jake to her office one afternoon for a private meeting. "I've been thinking about what's going to happen when we reach headquarters," she said. "So have I," Jake replied. "Captain, I don't think I can let them take Ember and Nova to that research facility." The captain nodded slowly. "I've read the reports about what happens at Omega-7. It's not a place for children, even alien children." "They're not just specimens," Jake said. "They're people. They have feelings and personalities, and they love and trust just like we do." "I know that. The whole crew knows that. But Jake, what can we do?" "Orders are orders." Jake had been thinking about this for days. What if we find a way to prove that the dragons are too valuable to risk in standard research protocols? What if we show that their abilities only work when they're happy and safe? Before the captain could answer, an alarm started blaring throughout the ship. The red warning lights came on and the computer announced, "Enemy vessel detected. All crew to battle stations." Jake ran toward his quarters to check on the dragons, but Ember and Nova were already in the hallway looking for him. Their scales were glowing brighter than Jake had ever seen them, and they seemed agitated and scared. "Papa! Danger coming!" Nova said, running to Jake. Bad ships coming!" Ember added, looking toward the front of the ship. Jake picked up both dragons and carried them to the bridge. Captain Rodriguez was busy giving orders to the crew, but she looked over when Jake arrived. "How did they know?" she asked. "Our sensors just picked up the Vex patrol ship 2 minutes ago." Nova was making worried sounds and pointing in the same direction that the sensors showed the enemy ship approaching. Ember was making a low growling sound that Jake had never heard before. The Vex ship was still too far away to be an immediate threat, but it was moving toward the Aurora at high speed. Captain Rodriguez ordered the crew to prepare for possible combat. But something strange happened as the minutes passed. Nova walked over to the main computer panel on the bridge and sat down next to it. Her scales began glowing so brightly that they lit up the whole room. Suddenly, the ship's defensive systems became more powerful than they had ever been. Ember positioned herself near the front of the bridge and kept making her low, warning growl. Every time she growled, the ship's sensors picked up new information about the approaching Vex vessel. "It's like they're helping us," the navigation officer said in amazement. "Our systems are performing at levels I've never seen." The Vex ship came close enough to fire a few shots at the Aurora, but the improved defensive systems easily blocked the attack. The enemy ship seemed surprised by how strong the Aurora's defenses were and decided to retreat rather than continue the fight. When the danger was over, both dragons calmed down. Their scales stopped glowing, and they returned to their normal, playful selves. But everyone on the bridge had seen what happened. The dragons had not only sensed the danger before anyone else, they had somehow helped the ship defend itself. Captain Rodriguez looked at Jake with new understanding in her eyes. "They protected us. They protected their family." Jake nodded, holding both dragons close. "They're not just learning to live with us, they're becoming part of us." That night, Jake made his final decision about what to do when they reached Federation headquarters. He would not let bureaucrats and scientists treat Ember and Nova like laboratory animals. These were his children now, and he would fight for them with everything he had. The dragons slept peacefully next to his bed, trusting their papa to keep them safe. Jake stayed awake, making plans to ensure that trust was not misplaced. In 1 week, they would reach headquarters. Jake intended to be ready for whatever came next. The Aurora docked at Federation headquarters on a gray morning. Jake stood at the window of his quarters, watching the huge space station grow larger as they approached. Ember and Nova pressed their faces against the glass next to him, excited to see something new. "Big place, Papa," Nova said, her blue scales shimmering with curiosity. "Very big," Ember agreed. "We explore with Papa?" Jake's heart felt heavy. "We'll see, little ones. We'll see." Admiral Kenneth Shaw was waiting for them at the docking bay with a team of scientists and security officers. Jake had met the Admiral before and knew him to be a man who cared more about military advantages than individual lives. Behind him stood Dr. Amanda Foster, a Federation ethicist who Jake hoped might be an ally. Captain Rodriguez led the way off the ship, followed by Jake carrying both dragons. Ember and Nova stayed close to him, sensing that something was different about this place. Their usual playful chatter was replaced by careful watching of all the new people around them. "Dr. Martinez," Admiral Shaw said with a cold smile, "I trust our specimens traveled well." "They're not specimens," Jake said firmly. "They have names, Ember and Nova." The Admiral ignored Jake's correction. "We have a schedule to keep. The research team at Omega 7 is eager to begin their studies." Dr. Amanda Foster stepped forward. Admiral, perhaps we should discuss the dragon's care requirements first. Dr. Martinez has been their primary caretaker for over a month. His insights could be valuable. Nova looked up at the Admiral and tilted her head. You not nice man, she said clearly. Papa not like you. Several of the scientists gasped. Admiral Shaw's eyes went wide. It speaks? She speaks, Jake corrected, and she's very good at reading people. Ember moved to stand slightly in front of Nova, her green scales beginning to glow with a warning light. No hurt, family, she said, looking directly at the Admiral. Dr. Foster knelt down to the dragon's level. Hello, Ember and Nova. My name is Amanda. I'm here to help make sure you're treated fairly. Both dragons looked at her carefully, then at Jake. Jake nodded. She's a friend, he told them. Nova walked closer to Amanda. You help Papa? You help us stay together? I'm going to try, Amanda promised. Admiral Shaw was getting impatient. This is all very interesting, but we have work to do. The transport to Omega-7 leaves in 2 hours. Actually, Dr. Foster said, there's been a complication. The dragon's legal status is being reviewed by the Federation Ethics Committee. No research can begin until that review is complete. Jake felt a spark of hope. He had contacted Dr. Foster before they arrived and asked for her help. She had promised to use every legal option available to protect the dragons. What legal status? Admiral Shaw demanded. They're alien specimens brought back for research. They're sentient beings with demonstrated intelligence and emotional capacity, Dr. Foster replied. Dr. Martinez has filed a formal request for guardianship, claiming they should be treated as refugees rather than research subjects. The Admiral looked angry. Guardianship? That's ridiculous. They're not human children. No, Jake said. But they are children, and they're the last of their species. They deserve protection, not experimentation. Nova tugged on Jake's sleeve. Papa, what happening? Why angry voices? Jake knelt down and hugged both dragons. Some people want to take you away from me to study you, but I'm fighting to keep us together. Ember's scales glowed brighter. No, take us from Papa. We stay with family. We not go with mean man, Nova added, pointing at Admiral Shaw. The Admiral tried a different approach. Dr. Martinez, surely you understand the importance of these creatures to our war effort. Their abilities could save thousands of human lives. Their abilities only work because they're happy and secure, Jake replied. Stress them or separate them from people they trust, and you'll lose everything that makes them special. To prove his point, Jake walked away from the group toward the other end of the docking bay. Immediately, both dragons became distressed. Their scales stopped glowing and they made sad, whimpering sounds. Nova ran after Jake, calling, Papa, no leave us! When Jake returned and picked up both dragons, their scales resumed their healthy glow and they relaxed against him. You see, Jake said to the Admiral, their emotional state directly affects their abilities. Treat them badly and you'll have nothing to study. Dr. Foster nodded. This supports the argument for keeping them in a stable environment with their chosen caregiver. The research value is actually higher if they remain with Dr. Martinez. Admiral Shaw was not convinced. The Omega-7 facility has everything needed for proper study. Emotional attachments can be overcome with time. No! Ember said loudly. Her scales suddenly blazed with bright light. No, go away from Papa! The lights in the docking bay flickered, and several electronic devices started making warning sounds. Nova's scales began glowing too, and somehow every computer screen in the area started showing error messages. The security officers reached for their weapons, but Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. Stand down. They're not attacking. They're just scared. Jake held both dragons close and spoke to them in a calm voice. It's okay. I'm here. No one is going to take you away from me. Slowly, the dragon's scales returned to normal, and the electronic problem stopped. but everyone had seen what happened. When the dragons were threatened with separation from Jake, their abilities became dangerous and uncontrolled. "Remarkable," one of the scientists whispered. "Their emotional state directly controls their power output." Dr. Foster looked at Admiral Shaw. "I think this demonstration clearly shows why the dragons need to remain in a stable environment. Any attempt to separate them from Dr. Martinez could result in uncontrollable and potentially dangerous responses." Admiral Shaw looked frustrated, but he was not stupid. He could see that forcing the dragons into traditional research protocols might destroy what made them valuable in the first place. "Fine," he said finally. "The guardianship hearing can proceed, but Dr. Martinez, if the committee rules against you, these creatures go to Omega-7 immediately." "Understood," Jake said. As the group prepared to leave the docking bay, Nova looked up at Jake with worried eyes. "Papa, we really stay together?" Jake kissed the top of her small head. "I promise, little one. We're family now. Families stick together no matter what." Ember purred against Jake's chest. "Love, Papa. Papa, protect us." "Always," Jake promised. The next few days would determine everything. Jake had one chance to convince the Federation Ethics Committee that Ember and Nova deserved protection as sentient beings rather than treatment as research subjects. The dragon's future, and his own, depended on whether bureaucrats could see past their fear and greed to recognize the bonds of love that transcended species. But looking down at the two small faces gazing up at him with complete trust, Jake knew he would fight with everything he had. They had called him Papa from the beginning. Now it was time to prove he deserved that title. The Federation Ethics Committee hearing took place in a large room filled with officials, scientists, and media representatives. Jake had never seen so many people interested in one case before. News of the talking dragons had spread quickly through the station, and everyone wanted to see what would happen. Jake sat at a table in front of the committee with Ember and Nova on either side of him. The dragons wore small translators that Dr. Foster had arranged so everyone could understand them clearly. They looked around the room with curious eyes, not understanding why so many people were staring at them. "Papa, why so many people?" Nova whispered. "They want to learn about you," Jake whispered back. "Just be yourselves, and everything will be fine." Committee Chairman Robert Chen called the hearing to order. "We are here to determine the legal status of the alien entities known as Ember and Nova, and to consider Dr. Martinez's petition for guardianship. Admiral Shaw, please present your case first." Admiral Shaw stood up and activated a large screen showing images of the destroyed planet Zirion Prime. "These creatures are the last surviving examples of an unknown species with abilities that could change the course of our war against the Vex Empire. Their strategic value is immeasurable." He showed videos of Nova improving computer systems and Ember stopping electrical fires. "Proper scientific study at our Omega-7 facility could unlock secrets that save millions of human lives. We cannot allow personal attachments to interfere with research that benefits all humanity." Ember tugged on Jake's sleeve. "Mean man want hurt us?" she asked loudly enough for everyone to hear. "He thinks studying you is more important than your feelings," Jake explained. Nova stood up on her chair and looked at Admiral Shaw. "You won't make us sad to help other people?" The Admiral looked uncomfortable. "It's not about making you sad. It's about understanding your abilities for the greater good." "But Papa says greater good means everyone happy together," Ember said. "Not just some people happy and some people sad." Murmurs went through the room. Several committee members leaned forward with interest. These dragons were not just intelligent, they were discussing complex moral concepts. Dr. Foster stood to present Jake's case. "The evidence shows that these beings are not mere animals with useful abilities. They are sentient individuals with emotions, relationships, and their own moral understanding. They have chosen to form a family bond with Dr. Martinez, calling him Papa and demonstrating loyalty and love." She played recordings of the dragons learning to speak and helping the Aurora during the Vex attack. Their abilities appear to be directly connected to their emotional well-being. They perform better when they feel safe and loved. Forcing them into a research environment against their will would likely destroy what makes them valuable. Nova raised her small hand, like she had seen humans do when they wanted to speak. Can Nova talk now? Chairman Chen smiled despite himself. Yes, Nova, you may speak. Nova stood up again and looked around the room. Nova and Ember come from dead world. Everything gone. No mama, no papa, no home. Jake Papa find us and make us not scared anymore. Jake Papa teach us words and games and how to be happy. Her voice got stronger as she continued. We love Jake Papa. He our family now. Why you want break family apart? That make everyone sad. Ember stood up next to her sister. Ember want say something too. She looked directly at Admiral Shaw. You think we just things to study, but we not things. We people like you. We have feelings and dreams and love. You take us from Papa, we not help you. We too sad to help anyone. The room was completely silent. Many of the officials looked surprised by how clearly the dragons expressed themselves. Some looked touched by their obvious love for Jake. Chairman Chen addressed the dragons directly. Ember and Nova, do you understand what Dr. Martinez is asking for? He wants to become your legal guardian, which means he would be responsible for your care and protection. Jake Papa already take care of us, Nova said. He feed us and teach us and make us feel safe. He already our Papa. We want stay with family, Ember added. Please not make us go with mean man. Admiral Shaw tried one more approach. If we allow this guardianship, how do we know the dragons will still be available for research that could benefit the war effort? Jake stood up. Because I'm a scientist too, Admiral. I understand the value of their abilities. But I also understand that their abilities come from who they are, not just what they can do. If you want their cooperation, you need their trust. And they trust me. To prove his point, Jake asked Nova to help with the room's computer system. She walked over to the main terminal and sat next to it. Her scales glowed softly, and suddenly every screen in the room displayed perfect clarity and improved response time. Then Jake asked Ember to demonstrate her fire suppression ability. She breathed her special mist onto a small controlled flame, extinguishing it immediately without any smoke or residue. As you can see, Jake said, they're happy to use their abilities to help others. But they do it willingly, as part of a loving family, not as forced test subjects. Committee member Dr. Sarah Williams asked, Dr. Martinez, what guarantees can you give that the dragons will remain available for beneficial research? I propose a new model, Jake replied. Instead of isolating them in a laboratory, let them live freely while contributing to research voluntarily. They can help improve computer systems and fire safety while also living normal lives. They can teach us about their species while learning about ours. Dr. Foster added, this approach would also establish important precedents for how we treat other intelligent alien species we might encounter in the future. It shows that humanity values cooperation over domination. Nova walked back to Jake and climbed onto his lap. Papa, we help make spaceships better. We help make computers work good. We help people be safe from fires. But we won't do it because we love helping, not because scared people make us do it. Chairman Chen looked at his fellow committee members. They whispered together for several minutes before he spoke again. This committee recognizes that Ember and Nova are sentient beings with the right to choose their own living arrangements. We grant Dr. Martinez full guardianship rights, with the understanding that the dragons remain available for voluntary research cooperation. The room erupted in cheers and applause. Jake hugged both dragons as tears ran down his face. We did it, he whispered. We're really a family now. We always family, Papa, Ember said, purring against his chest. Now everyone know we family, Nova added happily. 6 months later, Jake watched Ember and Nova playing in the garden of their new home on Research Station Alpha 3. The station had become a model for cooperative alien research. The dragons lived freely, attended school with human children, and helped with various projects whenever they wanted to. Ember had learned to speak perfect standard and was teaching other young dragons who had been found in distant sectors. Nova had become the station's chief computer consultant, improving systems throughout the facility. Both dragons had grown to the size of large dogs, but they still called Jake Papa and still slept in his room every night. They had formed friendships with dozens of humans and other alien species, but their bond with Jake remained the strongest. "Papa," Nova called from the garden, "come see, we teaching new dragon babies to speak." Jake looked out the window and smiled. 3 newly rescued dragon hatchlings sat in a circle with Ember and Nova, practicing words and sounds. The dragon species was no longer extinct, and their future looked bright. Jake walked outside to join his expanded family. The bond that had started with 2 scared babies under a pile of rocks had grown into something beautiful. It had changed Federation policy, saved a species from extinction, and proven that love truly had no boundaries among the stars. "Coming!" Jake called back. He was no longer just a scientist studying alien life. He was Papa to a growing family of dragons who had chosen to make their future alongside humanity. And he could not imagine wanting anything more.